Your source for everything paranormal. Para X. The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
During 2017, researcher Steve Mira and I, Barry Fitzgerald, traveled to the Southern Hemisphere to investigate the stuff of nightmares. Mummified remains, each possessing 3 fingers and 3 toes. Returning from Peru, we tell our story to Marla Brooks on our show Stirring the Cauldron, where we reveal the possible horror that may have haunted our species. We will also be speaking about our new project launch, On Stellar, a centralizing platform for all the fringe research worldwide. Join us on Para X Radio for this 2-hour special on March the 29th.
The words I now shall call. Live you must, and let to live. Fairly take, and fairly give. Do what thou will, if it harms none. By the magic of all, may it be done. Greet the days and greet the night, with joy and thanks for all delight. 9 woods in the cauldron go, as above, so below. Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron on the Para X Radio Network. Now.
Hey, merry meet everybody, and welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. A little late than never, but we're here. And tonight's opener was called Lost Souls by Midnight Syndicate. And that's because Lost Souls is, in a way, the topic of tonight's show. Now, my guest is author Robbie Thomas, and Robbie's a psychic medium, a spiritual counselor, psychic profiler, and he helps families and police fight against crime while bringing solace to those in need. Over many years of assisting in a lot of different murder and missing persons cases, Robbie's been able to give great detail regarding these devastating crimes or happenings, which have led him to find lost people, arrests being made in murder cases, and closures brought to families who desperately need it. He works closely with families in conjunction with law enforcement, finding resolve to some of the toughest cases. And tonight we're going to be talking about his new book called Psychic Profiler. And if you have any questions or comments for Robbie during the show, please send me a private message here at Para-X in the chat room. And if you're not here, come join us at www.para-x.com. Robbie, you made it. Surprise.
Oh, yes. Thank you for having me. It was a touch and go thing.
It was, but, so for the first couple of minutes, we just need to talk a little faster, and then we'll be all caught up. No big deal.
No big deal.
There's always a way to deal with it. All right, so let's cut to the chase. It's always good to start out with a little backstory. So I don't know about you at all. When did you first realize that you are psychic, and did it come as a shock, or were you like me, lucky enough to come from a family that believed that supernatural is natural and paranormal is normal?
Yeah. My first book I wrote in 2003. So I've been published now for 15 years. And I wrote inside the beginning of it how my peer section as a teenager, going back to as childhood, in regards to age 2. When I used to go around the house saying, I feel I'm adopted, I feel there's another sibling or somebody part of me, Mom. And my mom would say, he's doing it again. My father would say, get in here, leave your mother alone. And I'll take you back further. Back in the early 60s, if a mother had a child out of wedlock, the Roman Catholic Church would take the child and give the baby up for adoption. This gentleman promised my mother the world. They were to get married. It never happened. She became pregnant. And, of course, the church stepped in and took the baby in the early 60s. Now, my mother meets my father years later, marries him, has me. And, again, you have this 2-year-old running around speaking of either I'm adopted or I have something out there. Now, I'll bring everybody fast forward to 1994. The day my mother passed away, her side of the family, her brother and sister, my aunt and uncle, pulled me aside into the park. We went and sat and chatted for a little while. And they said, all those years, I was right. My mother left me a gift, and her name is Mary. And Mary's been looking for you. So it was, just blown out of the water because we just buried my mother, and they're telling me this. And then they got me on their big radio show of Fox, and Fox did a big reunification story of how back in age 2, I'd be saying what I was just telling the folks here listening, and we finally meet my sister. So it's been documented back to age 2.
Wow. It does go back a long time. And speaking of long time, I mean, you've been known in the
it does.
You've been known in the para world for a very long time. I mean, you work with people that we all know, and you've appeared on many TV shows, radio shows. But I don't know how you started out. I mean, in our world, were you a paranormal investigator, as many have, or a psychic from the get-go, or how did you get involved?
My first paranormal encounter, if you will, or investigation, back in 1978, there's a photo that hangs in my hometown art gallery. And when as a child, our first tools back in the days was a rope, baby powder, and a flashlight. You wanted the rope because you wanted your friends to hang onto the rope. You didn't want the ghost to take you. Right. And the baby powder you would sprinkle on the floor so that you would see their footprints. And, of course, the flashlight so you can get out.
Yeah.
And don't forget the good pair of sneakers. So we ended up going into the Lawrence home, which is now a recreation museum in my hometown. When they snapped that picture, and it's a full-body apparition that's inside the art gallery, I brought different folks like I'm going to name drop now, so I hope it's okay.
That's fine.
Yeah, Keith Age, Patrick Burns, the Sylvias, everybody. I did paranormal conventions in my hometown for years. So I brought everybody from A&E and NBC and everybody all down here. And I brought them to the very first place I went, which I was just speaking of. And they had a good eyeball of what went on. And we captured a lot of stuff through the 3 years of going there that I put the conventions on. Just to give everybody an idea what I did back in 1978. And that's when I started.
And you've been running ever since.
Yes, with those same sneakers.
I hope you got Dr. Scholl's or something, because otherwise your arches will be falling by now.
That's right.
Okay. Well, there was something I read at the very beginning of the book that got me thinking about something I really hadn't thought of before. I mean, you were talking about a text that you got from someone in your hometown saying that her husband was in the ICU, unable to communicate, and wondered if you knew of anybody who might be able to do a reading on him and find out what the problem was, or at least how he was feeling. So I want you to tell this story because it's a really amazing one and a life-saving one for that matter. But before we do, I have a question because reading that, it made me wonder if psychics are generally called in sometimes for medical issues like that. Because, as I said, if it weren't for your intervention and assistance, there's a man who would not be living to tell the tale. So, had you heard of any other people or other cases where people brought in psychics into a hospital or even a hospice to get in touch with someone that couldn't speak for themselves at that point?
Documented, if I look back on TV, maybe if I can recall seeing something like, Unsolved Mysteries or something. There's a few cases I've actually done. My other book called Signs from Heaven. There's a lady in Alberta. She had tumors on her spine, and they still follow me today on my social media. A lot of the families are all over my social media from murder cases and what have you. Uh-huh. And I used to have a forums back in mid-1990s. And so before there was Twitter, MySpace, and what have you. So a lot of those folks are still on Facebook, Twitter, and whatever now. Mm-hmm. I had her on the phone, and through many discussions with her and reading her what her problem was, she went to the doctors, and then they flew her to Calgary because they couldn't get over the fact that the tumors on her spine that were malignant mm-hmm. were vanished. They were gone. They shrunk down either to a pea size or gone. And so the stories in the book of how Andy Weber, that's the gentleman's name, and his wife, and mm-hmm. went through the motions. It was amazing. So I attribute that to a higher being, higher power than me. I mean, I was just there, the instrument to do what I had to do. Mm-hmm. But then coming full forward now to this case where you were talking in my hometown, I was filming with Keith Age our wrap-up of our Parasupernatural series in Virginia. I just landed in Virginia on the 17th of November, which was a Friday. And we were going to film Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then head back on Monday, back home, 12-hour drive. Mm. And I got the text immediately. I just got there. And she said what you just mentioned. And I said, I don't know anybody that's capable of doing this. And she said, could you at least help? I said, you hang on tell the doctors to hang on. I'll try to make it back as fast as I can. They wanted to unplug him. They wanted to take him off life support, kill him. Mm-hmm. He was brain dead. And you did the filming, very little sleep, and they were on my mind the entire time. And then my wife and I drove back from Virginia to Canada, and I made it back late at night. So the following morning, which would be a Monday morning, I ended up in the ICU, met Julie, and we gave each other a hug. She punched in the code to the ICU unit because it's secured. We went in. She presented me to Bill, and I've never seen a man or a human being, for that matter, that hooked up into machines. And it's just unbelievable. He had tubes coming out of his side, IVs in each arm, tubes out of his mouth, everywhere. I mean, it was everywhere. Machines all over him. Yeah. He wasn't there. So I immediately took my hat off. And I started praying. And my faith is Lord Jesus Christ. So I started praying to Jesus, and I said, God, you gotta either let Bill talk to me, or you have to give me some type of indication what's going on. I'm here for Julie. And then I started hearing, it's the wrong medicine. My brain is swollen, and it's going to take time for me to heal. So, and with that 3 minutes, the 5 minutes, I stopped. I looked at Julie. She says, oh, it's not good. And I said, no. And I hugged her. And then I said, this is what I heard. I said, it's the wrong medicine. His brain is swollen, and it's going to take time for him to heal. He's not dead. So the ICU unit team was waiting to hear what I had to say through Julie, and the neurologist, highly scientific individuals, were also waiting bated breath. So I left. It was their moment. I had to leave. This is the right thing to do. And I go home, and then I get these text messages and calls from Julie. She said that the ICU was all up in arms, and she laid out everything to them. She was totally upset. The doctor checked the charts, and of course it was the wrong medicine, swelling his brain. They pulled all the IVs, not the plug. They pulled all the IVs. And here we are today. Bill's home alive. He's talking. He's learning to walk again. He's going to be functioning very well. It'll just take time for him to heal, as I was told.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, when they tell us, they don't lie. Human beings lie, spirit doesn't.
Oh, they don't.
There's that big difference.
That's right.
And, okay, so in many walks of life, even in this more enlightened period that we think we're living in, psychics are still not believed to be credible in some circles. And I think that goes double for law enforcement agencies. And, because basically, as you said, they work like doctors with a scientific method. So when did you begin working with law enforcement, and how did that all unfold?
I went through to be a police officer myself twice. And the first time, it was a hire and fire in the same day. I was just too young. I went through all the medical, all the physical, all the psychological testing, and I was 17 years of age. You had to be 20 to be an auxiliary.
Mm-hmm.
So in that process, the chief said to me, come back when you're older. And I did. And I got hired on in a town outside of Toronto, Canada. And through the final brass, interviews and the physical, again, the psychological testing, everything. And then they said, you're hired. So I had to come back home to my hometown, prepare to move to this other town outside of Toronto. While I'm sitting in the kitchen, I hear the lady yelling, accident, accident. So I hop the fence, I run out the back door, hop the fence in my backyard, and there's this lady in a robe. And she says, it's an accident. So I run, and I'm running down this row of townhomes, the parking lot, and then it starts to curve to the street. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to run into a major car crash because the way that she's explaining it. And I get there and there's nothing. And then this gentleman to my left in a townhome, he goes, over here. So I run over to him and I step inside the kitchen. And then there's a lady running around the table screaming. And there's a man holding a doorknob and he waves me over. So I go over to him and now I'm still in my mindset thinking accident, person hurt, blood, something.
Mm-hmm.
And he opens the door, grabs my shoulder, and shoves me in. So my eyes are concentrated on the floor looking for a trail of blood. I look up, and there's a gentleman in the bathroom, and he's eyes open, staring at me. His lips are kind of purple-blue, and he looks clammy. So immediately the training of CPR and vitals take over. So I go and check. I don't feel a pulse. And then I started to go ahead and start to perform CPR. I hear, let me go. I stop for a moment, and I'm not thinking that, okay, all my life I grew up this way, but I'm concentrating on this individual. And I go, no. So I go back to do CPR, and I hear really loud, let me go. Then it hit me. I go, I can hear him. He's telling me let him go. So I didn't do it anymore. I stepped back. I went outside the door. And then the thing that really hit me was through the coroner and having the autopsy a day or two later, turns out it was my sister's best friend's father, and he had a massive coronary, and it tore the hole in the wall of his heart. So either way, I would not have been able to save him. Mm-hmm. But I heard him. So then I said, I quit. I don't want to be a police officer. Well, you can't quit, Marla, when you become hired on and they want you as one of their candidates. So they said, we're going to send down a captain, a sergeant, and a film crew. They're making a working tool for EMTs, firefighters, and police officers who quit under duress. Well, I wasn't stressed. I just knew my forthcoming was a little different than what I wanted to do, be a police officer. So they got all the film crew in, and we're filming. They're asking questions, and they get that big question: why did I want to leave the force? Why do I want to quit? And I told them, and they were expressionless. They just looked at me like, I'm nuts, but I'm not. And then it started back then. And my first case was in 1990. So it's been 28 years for me helping out with law enforcement and in that regard.
Yeah, I think a lot of them are a little bit more lenient now, a little bit more accepting, especially on cases that are completely unsolvable otherwise, in a sense, But all right, so psychics get messages in a variety of ways. We know this. And obviously you're clairaudient. Others are clairsentient, and all the other clairs. Are you just clairaudient, or are you clairsentient? Are you clairvoyant?
I looked at that question over many shows I've done over the years, and all the cases I've done, I've never titled myself anything. I just do what I do. I hear, see, I feel, I taste, I smell, everything.
Right.
So
Okay.
when I'm doing automatic hand drawing and I'm looking at a 4-year-old, one of the cases in the book was a 4-year-old little boy out of Kentucky, and it was Canada Day. You guys celebrate the July 4th. We celebrate July 1st. I live on a border town, so we get the whole week of celebrations. And, as you said, I toured all these years, and everybody knows me and what have you throughout the paranormal. And one liaison who was working with a detective at the time in Louisville, Kentucky, called me up and asked me to help out. Sent me a photograph of this beautiful 4-year-old little angel. So I have him on my screen, and I'm channeling this boy. And I'm getting things like stadium lights off. So then I start drawing these 4 circles that I see, stadium lights off. And all the diagrams for all the people who are tuning in really quick, you can go to my website, robbiethomas.net. You can see all that on the murder pages. And so I'm drawing all this, and it's all in the book as well. And then I see repeat offender. So then I write down repeat offender, 2 boys. So I write down 2 boys. And then I put, give me a name or something, I'm thinking. And it's coming, and John. So I write John. Well, if you stood on the murderer's front porch and you looked directly across the street through the clearing, Papa John's Stadium was right there. So I'm getting the area where the boy is. Now I'm starting to get men in construction orange vests and then flags. So the construction that was going on that street was only in front of the murderer's home. They were fixing the curbside, and they had flags in the ground. So when I wrote all that down, that was pertaining to now we're getting closer to the man's home. And then there's a break. I could not get anything, could not hear anything, could not feel anything. It felt like a void. And in the book, I use raw language because that's how it was. It's true and it's real. And as I'm sitting there and I'm not getting anything whatsoever, all of a sudden I'm back in. And there's a good time lapse, maybe a few minutes went by. And then now I'm talking to the boy. And now I know he's murdered because I'm getting him. And he's showing me flashes of this monster. And I'm drawing as fast as I can as a 4-year-old eye set. I'm putting it all down on paper. If you take a look at the mugshot of the man who murdered him and the drawing that I drew, the ears, the hairline, everything, it's identical to through a 4-year-old boy's mindset to me, showing me what I did. So then I got really upset. And I'm trying to go on a little further and get into this, and I need more because they're texting. I'm sitting here and I'm trying to get as much as I can. The phone's ringing. My wife's in the office. We're sitting there. It was very tense. Then I just yelled out, give me his name. Give me his effing name. I said, I was really upset, right? And then all of a sudden, I did. I got Cecil. So I wrote Cecil at the top, and I put an arrow down. And then all this information got faxed off immediately. And then it went down to the detective in Louisville. It went on, the news agencies got it, exactly the same thing. And the major activist down there got it. On the news that night, they said the Louisville police got the break they needed. And sure enough, it was Cecil Eugene New, the man that was told, and I wrote his name down on paper, who murdered 4-year-old little Ivan Cano.
Wow.
And he's in jail. He got arrested December 7th of 2007.
Okay, amen for that. Jeez. When you're working with spirit, when you're hearing and talking and everything, do you think it's a guide that comes through to you? Do you think it's perhaps a guide of a person that you're working with to intervene? Is it, divine intervention? What do you call it when you get information?
Yeah, it's my guides and angels and their guides and angels. And if they are past, I ask them to come through. Which this time I didn't ask. It just happened. He just happened to come through. Yeah. It was quick. And he's the one who gave me the name of the murderer. So, looking at all the different cases over the years, I always pray. I pray to God first. And I say, whoever's available who can help and do this with me, like I did with Bill, please let them come and give me some tangible piece of information that the law enforcement can use. So while I'm doing that, law enforcement's with me. They see me praying. And then we do the case. I go on scene, and that's how we derive our evidence.
Yeah, I mean, and people think that they can't necessarily ask. I mean, I always ask if it's something specific, like I'll ask for a vet guide, a veterinarian guide, or a real estate guide, or whatever you want to call it. We can do that, but people don't always accept that. They just think, well, whoever comes, but that isn't the case. I mean, they're just kind of waiting to be called upon. Don't you agree? Yeah,
it's putting them in employment, giving them the opportunity to help you. And, and they come at the right time. You can't force it. It comes for a reason.
Yeah, it does. And when it's necessary, it comes. I mean, a lot of people think that they can just call on guides or angels or whatever for something very frivolous, and they're not always going to get a result because there are a lot more important things to do than maybe pick a lottery number.
Yeah.
Gets silly after a while.
Absolutely.
So now probably the law enforcement agencies get in touch with you sometimes, and perhaps maybe, like you said, the spirit of somebody that you're trying to help will get in touch with you, and then you notify the authorities. It's kind of a very nice way. Everybody's kind of doing what they need to do to get things done.
Yeah, it's true. It's a collaborative and it's a team effort. One individual law enforcement officer, I've worked several cases with him. So, I worked a double homicide and missing endangered individual. So I'm sitting in my home. He's in Florida. He calls me up, and the bolo went out at 9:35ish in the morning in Kansas City, Florida. And he's on the phone. He said, "I need your help. This poor lady's endangered, and we fear for her life. We got officers out looking everywhere." So I started channeling. He sent me the file. I'm looking at the file on my computer. I get access through different things like that. So I'm looking at her photograph, the background, and I'm channeling. And I said, certain aspects. I'm texting him. I'm calling him. I'm texting him. And as I'm giving him the information, he's feeding it immediately to the forces that are out on the blue line. And they're checking everywhere. He's jumping the gun. And when I said, rocks and water, and I see a big body of water, he sends them to the creek, but they're not in the creek. He had to wait for the rest of the information to come in. He was just jumping the gun. And then all of a sudden, I said, she took a bus. She took a bus from St. Petersburg to Tampa Bay. I said, that's where she is. And he goes, okay. And then by then, they had a helicopter in the sky. They had thousands of police officers out. And they found her, Tampa Bay, within an hour.
Wow. Now that brings up a question too. Now suppose that you had seen that she had passed. Do you pass on that information, or do you maybe just give the location? And because a lot of mediums and psychics will not say that somebody has passed. Because it's either hurtful or, if you say the wrong thing, it's horrible. So how do you handle that?
Professionally, I don't give information to the families that they are not privy to because of the fact what you just stated.
Right.
They are on board. I work with both, but once I'm hired on to do a case, I go directly with the law enforcement. So I'll give you an example. When Victoria Stafford went missing, I seen that she went missing 2 days prior to her going missing, and I'm doing my drawings, the tree line, the pile of rocks, the Mennonites, the horse and buggies, the roadway, everything I could put down. And I waited. But before I did that, I went and presented the information to 99.9 Fox FM program director, George Hayes. And he has a little clip. He says, you showed me this before they investigated. And he goes, I was skeptic, but he goes, I'm a believer now. So that all went to the family. After that, she went missing and it was put on the news that Victoria's missing. We got a hold of the family. We went in and down to Woodstock, which would be about a couple hours from where I live. And I drove every day. I went down back and forth. And I met up with Detective Brown in the office and, all a melee of everything, information, what have you. So as we're going through it all, and they were looking for a woman because all they had was a woman on a grainy video leading Victoria away from the school. And that's what they were going on. They said, it's just a woman. And I profiled an older man and a woman. So the two people who were murdered, without going deeper into the complete story, both of them are in jail. The older man and the younger woman. It's a very deep case that's in the book. It's very detailed. It shows you, with all the progression, the actual. I give everybody the behind the scenes of, text message, emails. I'm showing all the proof that no one's ever done before and put into a book. I get the testimonies from all the law enforcement, the letters from the families, everything. So it's just a button-up case to show that this is being done.
Yeah, the whole thing, it's complicated, yet it's not. It's important, and nobody can deny that. But to your knowledge, how long do most law enforcement agencies remain active on cases or cold cases? And I'm asking because this is kind of a follow-up to the question about what we were just talking about. Have you ever been approached, or have you ever approached the authorities about a case that was left hanging for perhaps years, and then you got a lead out of the blue and were able to go to the authorities, pull the case out of mothballs, and actually get the case solved?
No, I don't ambulance chase. And I'll tell you, and I know that all the people here are listening will love to hear this. I've done a lot of shows on law enforcement radio and television.
Mm-hmm.
They don't like it when people just call in and say, I got a tip.
That's when they don't believe you. Yeah, probably. Usually.
Yeah.
Because they get a lot of crackpots doing that.
Oh, yeah. They do. They do. And they have to follow everything. So it takes time, effort, money. And sometimes it could take weeks, months to follow up all these leads, and it leads to dead ends. Mm-hmm. In the book, there's several cases I've done where there's been psychics say, your husband's dead behind a jail in Mexico. You won't find him. And they told this family for 14 years this. Mm-hmm. I did a tour back in 2010. It was called the Psychic Justice Tour. I hooked up with the U.S. Marshals, your Marshals. I'm Canuck, so I hooked up with your Marshals. Mm-hmm. RCMP over here, different state police, different sheriff offices. And I went from my hometown, I opened up in my hometown where this case started. And I made her do her homework. I felt he was alive, not dead. And I gave her an area out west in Canada. So she checked with the OPP, which is like state police America, to the RCMP, which is like FBI in America. And they found that the town I said he was in, alive, they found him alive. So for 14 years, they were told in this long run of how you say, they waste time and effort and what have you. And we find him. We found him alive. Yeah. It's a shame, but, it's just being honest, everybody has different ability. Everybody has a different sense of intuition. Some people just, at times I think that they can do it, but they don't. And for 14 years, hurt that family. So I don't know what to say about that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So many ifs, and, we're dealing with people, and people aren't always easy to deal with or easy to understand for that matter. Now you're talking about getting images about things, the rocks, the people and all that. And everybody that has any kind of ability has their own way of receiving images or whatever. But a lot of people complain to me that they can't figure out what the images are. And I mean, I think we've all had a couple of times, especially in the beginning, where you see something and it makes no sense to you. And so you don't try to figure out, but it's about somebody that you're reading or talking to or something. And you learn the hard way that whatever comes into your head, you better spill it because it's going to mean something to somebody, but I think people doubt themselves. So, I mean, do you have advice for people who are kind of going through that, geez, I don't know what to do, I don't know how to read this, I'm kind of in that area?
Oh, absolutely. Everybody has, the way I describe it sometimes is this, you have your specialists in the doctor's field, you have your surgeons, you have your physicians, and you have your pharmacists. Everybody in that retail area is different. They all have their own different ways of doing things. So back in the early or the mid 90s, in the forums, I used to teach and tell people how to keep a journal. When you journal every day and you have that specific, like you explained, the imagery, I don't know what it means. Write it down. In the next day or the next week, it happens again. And write it down until you start to feel and formulate some type of feeling that is more of an understanding of what you're seeing. And you keep writing, then you can reflect back 6 months or a year or however long your journal is and say, now I understand how I got from point A to point B, and I can understand how this works now with me. And then, it'll be a lot faster than that for a lot of people, but they can get the understanding. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's a good tip. And People tend not to trust themselves. They tend not to, okay, I see that. That makes no sense. That's a purple elephant. What does that have to do with anything? Well, it does. So just, I always say, don't doubt yourself. Don't try to understand it because, as you said earlier, we are the tools. We are not the ones who are supposed to figure it out. It's just, pass on the information, and if you get it to the right people, which we hopefully do, take it from there, and then we step back because that's all we can do. But speaking of little strange things, I've got a question for you. Have all your cases been kind of regular, straightforward, for lack of a better word, or have you ever been approached to try and figure out other enigmas, perhaps something maybe alien related or crypto things like Mothman or Big Feet or whatever?
Yeah. Many producers have approached me over the years, and one in particular, I know a lot of people know this. There's people go missing in national parks throughout the United States, around the world, actually. Mm-hmm. No trace. Here I am. I'm tied up with America's Most Wanted film crew, filming me on my own series. I got now another Emmy Award-winning film director who's tied to John Walsh, who wants and is put another program forward, also with law enforcement to film me. We're getting into that now. And I just wrapped up a Supernatural series with Keith Age. So my irons are all in the fires everywhere, and I'm very limited. So, I'd love to go do that. And if it was you, Marla, and you said, Rob, we're going to go to the national parks and we're going to try to, I'd say, I'd love to, but it's just, I'm so thin. At present, I'm working 3 major high-profile murder cases. One out of L.A., one in, I can't actually say because we actually got the witness to come forward, but it's very high-profile in America. Mm-hmm. And I got the Indian government involved in 10 soldiers that are missing. So I got a lot of things out there that I'm doing, plus all the cases that come into the office daily. You can only do so much. You're one person, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, some people would just kind of say, being busy is the best excuse because, you're doing important things. Other people, if they were asked, they would probably say, that's bull. They don't believe in that stuff. What, aliens and Bigfoot and Mothman, all the crypto stuff, all the other stuff. So, I think those of us that keep an open mind are good. Those of us that are busy are better. But, sometimes I'm sure things like that must have crossed your desk, rolled your eyes maybe at some of those things. Like if it, purple people eater in my backyard. Yeah, right. You're going to run to beat the band on that one. But yeah, we're in a para world, right? We're in a paranormal world where, the possibilities are there. Anything is possible, but it takes a lot sometimes to kind of believe it, actually, in a sense. But
yeah, there are some things that are really wacko, and you think about, I had your head inventor from IBM. He rewrote your Homeland Security Initiative, show up in one of the murder scenes, a double homicide. I don't know how he found me. Go figure. Working for the government, right? So I've seen some things, and it's pretty amazing. Over the years, like you said, doing filming and working with an individual that was in the PSYOPs in your American Army over in Iraq, and he was also a liaison for the Israeli government. So, doing things like this, and I'm having the opportunity to see this stuff, and I'm thinking, this is crazy. It's like beyond me, but it's real. And I see it. It's right before me. So I don't really shake my head anymore, but like you do, we get a giggle out of certain things like the purple people eater, but I mean, that's about it.
I'm going to go to bed tonight, and there's going to be one standing at the foot of my bed at 3 o'clock in the morning. Just watch, just because I made fun of it. That's how the world works.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I'll blame it on the
better you than me.
Yeah. Well, purple's not a bad color. It's just not. Now you mentioned a TV project that you're working on, and I was looking at your website, and you've got that going on. You want to share a little bit about it?
Yeah, there's a couple, and there's a few actually.
Mm.
The one on my website was America's Most Wanted filmed it, and let's take it back for the folks. I did a Make-A-Wish Foundation charity event outside of Toronto, and the producers for Rescue Mediums was there at the same time. Now, what's really strange about this is one of the cases in the book is someone from the sex slave. One of the organizers had a girl chained in her basement, so I'm going to leave it at that so people can read that, but got her free. No, I ended up getting her free and sent home, and the individual was AWOL from the American Army, so that's a very deep story people can read there.
Mm-hmm.
Going through the motions of this charity event, and then Michael Lamport says to me, if you got anything, and this is 2010, 2009, if you got anything, here's my card. I said, yeah. So then I sat on it for about a year, and then I was doing these cases, and I went back to him and I said, I did this one case out of Kentucky. I had the fire chief, I had the incoming sheriff, and I had the coroner. And it's really stinky, it's dirty, and it's all about money. So this two young children were murdered over money. And so I had the coroner there, and I'm talking to him, and I said, how did you become coroner? And he says, well, I was appointed coroner from the sheriff that was in office before. And I said, okay, so how does that work down here? I know in Canada and anywhere else around the world, you have to have a medical degree.
Mm-hmm.
You have to go to school for this. You have to have some viable license that says you're coroner. He says, no. He says, he gave me a VHS tape. I went home and I watched it for 7 days. And then this murder happened and I was coroner. And I said, what? And this like Virginia, Kentucky area, right? Really deep backwoods. And I'm thinking, this isn't real. This is a movie. It's happening right in front of me. This is stuff you see on TV, and this isn't happening. And he says, no, son. He goes, it's true. He said, I was a grocery clerk, and the sheriff asked me how I could tell if a man died. I said, what's your answer? He says, I could tell if a man died and had a heart attack just by looking at him. So then the sheriff says, okay, you're coroner. And that's how I became coroner. Wow. And I said, you lost her larynx. How'd you lose all her stuff in her throat? That was the key points to this case. Mm-hmm. He goes, I don't know. He says, I'm just a coroner. So, I mean, I run across things, and, and I kept the minutes to that. And that'll probably be in my second volume of coming out, my other book of the murder cases and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But, I've seen things, Marla, that are crazy, looking at, off the wall, like you mentioned, and things like this. I've seen it all.
That's probably a book to itself, the off-the-wall stuff. It's like, it's like a TV show, outtakes, kind of. Yeah, that would be...
That would be a good project, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would. Yeah. There you go. Put it on your to-do list. Because you are very prolific, and you do have a whole lot of books out there. I've got to mention that. And while I'm mentioning that, where can people find all these books?
You can all go to, actually take a stop off at robbiethomas.net. My library is right there. It takes you to Amazon. If not, just go directly to Amazon and look me up.
Yeah. And are all your books up on Amazon?
Yeah, all my books are up on Amazon. Some stores carry a lot of them. If they don't have them in your local store, they can actually order them in for you.
Yep, and as we always say, go to your independent booksellers and give them a break, and, they will appreciate it, and so will the rest of us, because chain stores a lot of times have enough money. They don't need to worry about it.
Absolutely. Yes, I like that.
Yeah, I think it's really important. All right, we have time for one more quick story. Your choice, something interesting. It might be off the wall. It might be something that was just taken care of. Talk to me.
Yeah. We're looking at this year coming here. LAPD. This is a very high profile case out in LA. Biltmore Hotel, the America's Got Talent show.
Mm-hmm.
Back in 2010, people can Google this and go and see TMZ, everything. It's all there.
Yep, I know about that.
The lady was found dead, half naked at the bottom of the Biltmore Hotel lobby area stairwell.
Mm-hmm.
And this gentleman calls me up and sends me all this information, binders, and I'm talking piles of paperwork of court papers and proceedings.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going through the motions with him, and I did a reading, and I said, LAPD is looking at this the wrong way. They're looking at she fell 6 floors, but no broken bones, no splatter of blood, nothing. And I said, you know what? I see you coming out of your room, turning right and going down this one little area. There's an exit. You go out there, and it goes down a really back way. And he did. He filmed it. And he filmed the reenactment of how he said the blood would be here, the blood would be there, the body was put over here. And as he goes to reach for the doorknob on the way out, she goes, oh, honey, the door doesn't open that way. Remember? It opens this way. So you look at that, and just the common sense will say, how in the hell would they know? And why would she say that? Would they done it before? Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Caught him on film. He filmed it for me. I'm the only one who has the video, along with LAPD. And I've had Crime Watch and all those other shows begging me for it. And I'm not going to give it to them because we have to go after the people who did this and put them away for the right reasons.
Right. Exactly. All right. Well, we're just about there. So why don't you let everybody know what your website is one more time, where they can contact you, because they might need you at some point for something as well. Hopefully not in the worst way, but yeah.
Yeah, a good way. And no, please don't. I don't want your children going missing, and I don't want anybody hurt in your family. And I send out a lot of love and blessings to everybody who's tuning in. I've seen a lot of things over the years, folks. 28 years of a lot of murder, missing persons, and having to go on death scenes and seeing autopsy photos and sitting with moms and dads and children and trying to explain why. I hope I never have to meet you. I hope I never have to see anybody under the circumstances of that. I'd rather meet you, shake your hand, and say hello and nice to see you. But you can all reach me at robbiethomas.net. Very simple, robbiethomas.net.
Very easy. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here tonight, sharing bits of your book. And I think the stories that you told are compelling enough for people to want to read more. I do, anyway. And I want to thank everybody for listening in live and on podcast as well. And until next time, everybody, blessed be and merry meet again. Good night.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks. Please join us again next week at the same time for another great guest and more cauldron stirring. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2018. The Path of the Goblin King by Kevin MacLeod is licensed through Incompetech.com.